Jazz Club.
Hello and welcome to Big Wrist Watches. Now it's been a while since my last video and I hear you thinking, what the hell happened to this guy? Well, let me immediately address the elephant in the room, or rather the lack thereof. I've lost about 50 kilograms since the last time you saw me. Now, 8 months ago I decided to turn around my life for the better, since I was getting more and more health issues related to my weight. I've been severely overweight for my entire adult life and I decided that had to change. I can tell you, with the weight I've lost, I now feel a lot better, more active, and most of my health issues have been resolved or at least improved. Another consequence of the change is the fact that my wrist has shrunk from 21 centimeters in circumference to only 18 centimeters. Now, that might not sound like a huge amount, but for watches it surely is. I never thought the weight loss would have such a huge impact on my wrists, but here we are. While I couldn't even dream of wearing 36mm watches in the past, now that's a very viable option all of a sudden. And the opposite is also true. Everything above 44mm is just too big for me. Now, as the channel started as Big Wrist Watches, I'm keeping the name for now, as a reminder of where I came from and what I have achieved in the past 8 months. The weight loss also has led to quite a few changes in my collection, and the watch I will be discussing today is a part of that. It's the Bulova Accutron Spaceview. So let's first dive into the history of the Spaceview. We'll start with a little history lesson about Bulova. It might sound like a ubiquitous mass-produced brand to most of you, but Bulova watches have a very rich history indeed. Bulova was founded in Queens, New York, as the J. Bulova Company in 1875 by the Czech immigrant Josef Bulova. In 1912 he launched his first plant dedicated entirely to the production of watches in Biel, Switzerland. Later, in 1923, the company was reincorporated under the name Bulova Watch Company. In 1948, the inventor Max Hetzel, who had started his career as an engineer at the Federal Polytechnic of Zurich in Switzerland, that's a mouthful, was hired by Bulova because they had decided they wanted to be a part of the electronic watch revolution that they knew that was coming. Now, the Elgin Watch Company had the first working electronic watch prototypes in 1952, but Hamilton was the first to retail an electric watch in 1957. However, in these first electronic watches, the battery drove a regular balance wheel, also found in mechanical watches, so it didn't really outperform mechanical watches regarding accuracy. Now, meanwhile, inventor Max Hetzel was going at it from a completely different angle. He started using tuning forks made of 2 parallel arms and a microtransistor that created electrical impulses in order to activate 2 coils. These coils were as thin as human hair and almost 200 meters in length. The pulse oscillated at 360 Hz, which resulted in a distinct humming noise and a smooth second-hand sweep. The Accutron movement was thus born, and the first prototype became functional in 1954. In 1959, William O. Bennett, an American engineer working for Bulova, developed the caliber 214 based on the initial prototype. This was the first ever mass-produced tuning fork movement, and it started being used a few years later in the new Bulova Accutron watches. It was accurate to about 2 seconds per day, which blew away the competition, be it electrical or mechanical. The first models using the Accutron movement started being sold in 1961. These new Bulova watches were meant to look like regular watches, hiding the movement behind the dial. But a limited amount of exhibition models, called the Spaceview, were sold to retailers in order to show potential customers the movement. Now, very quickly these exhibition models were all sold out to excited customers, and the retailers urgently started requesting more Spaceview stock. Now, Bulova never intended to produce the Spaceview in large quantities, but they could hardly argue with their customers, now could they? And so they started producing them for retail. By this time, Accutron watches started being used in the military, in aerospace missions such as the X-15 program, and later in the Mercury and Gemini space programs. An Accutron with a 24-hour dial, the Accutron Astronaut, was worn by a number of NASA astronauts, and Accutron clocks were used in the dashboards of no less than 46 space missions. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper was the victim of an electrical issue in his capsule, and he used his astronaut to time the retro burn of his engines during re-entry. It ended up being the most accurate splashdown achieved during the Mercury program, and he later praised the Accutron for saving his life. The Accutron was also used by the American Railroad staff as it became the certified railroad watch in 1962, clearly saying so on the dial of certain models. In the 1970s, Omega also started using tuning fork movements based on Max Hetzel's designs, who started working for them in 1969. This new movement did not infringe on the patents of the Accutron movement, and was called the Megasonic. These movements are widely regarded as a Rolls-Royce of tuning fork movements, and incorporated some improvements on the original designs. Now, famously in 1971, Seiko introduced the first quartz movement to the retail market with the Astron, which basically uses more or less the same principle than a tuning fork movement, but with a quartz crystal instead of a metal tuning fork. Now, quartz movements eventually proved superior to tuning fork movements, as we all know, because of the higher accuracy and the reduced cost especially. In 1977, the production of Accutron movements was stopped after more than 5 million pieces were sold. The quartz crisis quickly followed when all watchmakers thought mechanical movements were soon to become obsolete. Now, we all know better, right? So on to my personal Accutron watch then. This is the cushion case chapter ring model with integrated bracelet. The case number is 7396 and it was produced somewhere in the 70s. It has a diameter of 36 mm and a lug-to-lug of about 44 mm. Now, mine is a new old stock model and has been converted to accept 1.55 volt batteries. Originally, the 214 movement ran on Mercury batteries, 1.35 volts, and while new batteries may work out of the box, they are not recommended for use without modification, as they can make their movement run too fast, with a possible damage as a result. It also places too much strain on the coils and it will greatly reduce the lifespan of the watch, so beware. Now, I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it, but there is a very distinct, clear humming noise coming from the movement when you put it up to your ear. This is not audible under regular circumstances in my experience. However, I must admit that I have severe tinnitus, so it might just be me. Now, I catch myself looking at my Spaceview all day long. The exposed movement with the visible coils and the tuning fork is absolutely gorgeous and positively mesmerizing. The second-hand sweep is smoother than a baby's bottom, and the watch keeps remarkably accurate time. As you can see, there is no visible crown, since the time setting happens on the back of the watch by popping out a lever and turning. This makes the watch very clean and sleek to look at. The integrated bracelet adds to this sleekness, and it wears very comfortably. Now, I still don't have small wrists, but this watch wears beautifully regardless of its smallish 36 mm diameter. This is not my first Accutron though, as I've mentioned. I've also had a 1975 anniversary model in the past, of which I still have a few photographs, which you see here. The watch was made for the 100th anniversary of the Bulova watch company. Its diameter is 38 mm, but it becomes wider at the bottom at 42, so it wears considerably larger. The stainless steel version is very rare, as most anniversary models were gold-plated. I still regret selling it to this day, as Accutrons are becoming very expensive now, and this rare model especially so. Another Accutron watch I've owned was this cushion case Spaceview. This watch was 38 mm in diameter, if I'm not mistaken, but I always took offense to how small it looked on my wrist, which was the reason why I sold all of my Spaceviews in the past. However, this has changed now, and I have a feeling that this Spaceview is here to stay. Now, this wraps up my video. As you can see, I'm a very big Bulova fan, both vintage and the new stuff that they do, because their new movements are also very nice. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, then please like and subscribe to my channel. And then I hope to see you next time. Okay, so see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.